Coming up on today's episode of The Story Detective, we're going to be talking a little bit about my Camp Nanowrimo project for next month, and a few thoughts on the new NaNoWriMo site. That's what's coming up. Stick around. I hope you guys are ready to go for NaNoWriMo next month. It's rapidly approaching, and I don't think any of us are ever completely planned as well as we hope to be. I'm trying to get some videos done today. I'm spending what I hope will be my last day batch filming and have enough to get through the month. What am I working on? Not the horror novel that I worked on during last November's NaNoWriMo. That was kind of a bit of an excursion to get away from the series that I'm working on. Something a little different. The series I have two series. One is a science fiction series, and the other is a Sherlock Holmes series. Now, the Sherlock Holmes series is what I'm going to be working on next month. I already have it in draft, and I'm going to be editing the first book, which is here, called Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, Conversations Concerning M. And like the title suggests, that revolves around Moriarty, at least the period before Holmes went to that fateful meeting in which he was presumed dead for 3 years. It was a very meaningful time for Holmes and Watson, but there was a lot going on, and what was happening not only changed their lives, but the people that were involved with them as well. The Sherlock Holmes stories written in the original canon by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle were all short stories, but even the novellas didn't really get that in depth in terms of the world around Sherlock Holmes or the supporting cast. They were there to help bolster the story, but we never really saw who they are. We saw glimpses, but not a lot. We didn't even see a lot of the world around Sherlock Holmes in the 1800s. And as that's portrayed in some of the movies, it's not done very broadly either. When in fact there were a great deal of things happening in the world then that parallel what's happening in the world now. People are people in any time. And I'm going back to that time in hopes of expanding a little bit on the world in which Sherlock Holmes lived and expanding on the characters. Conversations Concerning M is going to take place from 4 different viewpoints. Dr. Watson's, of course, and 3 other cast members. My hope is that it will expand on the story, show more people's part in it, how the phenomenon that was Sherlock Holmes being the Superman of his day affected people's lives. And then we came to this abrupt death, or his faking his death after the confrontation with Moriarty. This story, or rather the series that I'm working on, started out as a novel that I did several years ago. And I did a couple of different reboots of the novel to try to make it work. However, in expanding on all that and looking at the different characters, it was too big to fit in a single novel, and I thought of making it a trilogy. But the things that were happening within the context of the first story was either going to be a thin slice of everything that was going on, and it really gutted the story, no matter how I tried. So I put it aside. I came back to it with a fresh idea and decided to make the series, which I've currently drafted. Now, the series is going to be a 4-novel arc, and this book happens to take place before the main series. By the time you get to the end, you will see just how much the story of Moriarty impacted these other characters. So when we get to the series, which takes place 3 years later after Holmes suddenly pops up and he's alive, they not only have Moriarty's chief lieutenant, which was Colonel Sebastian Moran, but a host of other things. It's going to be a much larger story and a lot more to deal with. This novel sets that up from the 4 different points of view, but it's also a self-contained story on its own. You wouldn't necessarily have to read the series to understand and grasp this one. There's also going to be a 5th point of view. That 5th point of view is going to be either a short story or a novella. I'm leaning more towards novella length. It will also be self-contained, but it's going to fit right in with conversations pretty seamlessly. But it's going to be the reader magnet. So we're going to have this and the reader magnet, which fit together into the world that I'm creating and the expansion on the characters that I'm attempting. I've read Sherlock Holmes stories that tried to get into a third-person narrative and get a little bit more into the heads of some of the other characters or the supporting cast that those writers developed at the time. For the most part, aside from maybe one or two, it doesn't work because we're used to that first person from Dr. Watson's point of view. So I decided it would seem more natural to the original canon to do a first person multiple, meaning each chapter will be from a different person's point of view, and we will see things, sometimes even the same things, from a different point of view, and get out of the heads of the singular point of view that's saying this is the way it is, when we could actually have other reasons, other people's points of view coming into play. So I think, for my way of thinking as a Sherlock Holmes fan, that seemed to be the best way to play this up and fit into the original stories. I'm reading between the lines of the original canon as well as expanding on some ideas, so I'm hoping that for the fans of the original stories it won't seem overly jarring or leaping into left field, because there's a lot of food for thought in the original canon. It's just that a lot of those stories weren't told, and a lot of those points of view, well, most of the points of view, weren't given a voice. Those first Sherlock Holmes stories began in 1887, so 133 years later, give these other characters a bit of a voice so that we might see these stories from a fresh eye, a fresh point of view, and still be able to relate to the original canon on some level. That's my plan. I hope when the book comes out that you guys will be interested enough to give it a look. In terms of the NaNoWriMo site, I listed this project, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe it was more like 3 weeks ago now. And I went on last night because I did this cover rough and I wanted to update it, and suddenly my project had vanished. Now, this was the same exact thing that happened last November. I listed my project, and by the time I got to working on it a few days before, it had disappeared and I had to go in and redo the whole thing. Same thing. That's not very promising. We also have these groups now instead of a cabin, and the groups can only hold 12 people tops. So if you have more than 12 friends, you're going to have to divide it up into several groups, and that's a little inconvenient. My group at this point is more than 12 people, so we are going to have two different groups. It's not going to be a huge deal to have two screens open and to go back and forth between the two, but it's not going to be as unified either. I don't want to knock NaNoWriMo or sound like I'm doing that, because I'm going to continue to support them because it's a worthy cause regardless. It's just after not updating their site for so long, it seems like they're making a leap, but that leap from the technology they were using to now should be an upgrade, not a downgrade. They've given it a new face, but it seems like whoever is trying to program these things into the new site either doesn't quite understand what the old site represented to writers, or they're struggling with it. I don't know how everything else is going to work out once we get on there and start attempting to message or do the things that we couldn't do last time. So hopefully some of those bugs from November have been worked out. But now they have new bugs for Camp Nano, and that seems a little bit limiting. And I'm not sure what happened to being able to do minutes on Camp Nano. I see two options. There's a word count and whether you're drafting or editing. So I put in a low word count because I want to take my time with this, and something that I feel that I can reach or exceed, because I don't want to be at the point where I feel like I'm having to push myself because I'm not going to edit 50,000 words or more in a month. That's just not going to happen. So I put less than half of that. That way I have room to breathe, room to make some vlogs, and still not lose my sanity. What I've done and what I'm going to continue to do is, since last November when things weren't working out, I created a Facebook group. It's a private group, but that doesn't mean the doors are closed to anyone in the community. Just knock and you'll gladly be accepted into the group if you want to join a group where you don't have one of your own. Or if you have a group of friends already, you could make a group of your own. Making it a private group keeps all of the spam and the ads and everything that's annoying about Facebook out. We haven't had any of those problems whatsoever. So it's worked out pretty well in terms of that. And the conversations that we have once the cabin or the groups close won't go away. We've all stayed in contact, and we've all updated one another since last November, so that part of it has been a really good thing. I'm also going to be having the groups on the site, whether they'll be utilized fully or partially. What we've discussed in my group is we're going to have the little encouraging chats in the moment while we're working on the site or whatever is going on from day to day. But if we have an important or meaningful subject to talk about, or it's something that's a little more in depth than just trying to encourage one another and give good cheer, we're going to come back to the Facebook group and have those conversations there so they don't get lost. So we kind of have a unified headquarters where the important stuff is going to take place, and the site where we can go and work and participate in NaNoWriMo and continue to be supportive to their cause. So we have the best of both worlds. As I've said before, if you're looking for some support or you want to be a part of a really good group, and we do have a lot of good people, go to Friends of NaNoWriMo, send me a request if you want to join. The door is always open. So how are you guys' projects going? I hope everything is going well, or at least that you're mostly underway and that you're excited and ready to write. That's the main thing. It's not about the site, it's not about anything really except for the people and getting our stories down. And the people really make it a meaningful experience. So that's what I've got for you today. A quick update on the project, an invitation to join or form your own group. Looking forward to next month, and I hope to see you all there and watch your videos. We're all in this together. So until next time, keep those keyboards clacking.